What's up, everybody? It's time for another year of mid-season quarterback grades. Now, technically, this video is coming out a little bit past mid-season, but you know what? I'm doing my best. I'm a single mother. I'm trying to keep everything together. There are 34 quarterbacks in this video, and why are there 34? Because there have been 10 weeks thus far, and 10 times 14 is 140. Now, why 14? Because that's the minimum amount of passes per game that a quarterback in a 16 or 17 game season has to average in order to be qualified. So up to this point, 14 throws a game would be 140. That's how you get to the 34 quarterbacks. I've been rambling long enough. Let's begin the video right after this. Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved meals right to your doorstep. Their team of gourmet chefs create each meal using only ingredients with integrity to help you feel your best all day long. Eat stress-free this summer with Factor's delicious ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. Also, discover more than 60 add-ons every week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day long. So what are you waiting for? Get started today and fuel up for your springtime goals. When things get hectic, Factor is flexible. Change your order up every week with plans from 4 to 18 meals per week, or pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. I've said it in all the other ads that I've done for Factor, and it's 1000% true. They are the real deal. They have my complete and total endorsement, so if you're on the fence about it, you shouldn't be. They are legit. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50berry to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50berry at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Kyler Murray. It's been an interesting season for Murray to try and figure out. The Cardinals started 2-4, and it looked as though they were on pace for another wasted season. And then they've ripped off 4 wins in a row, and despite Kyler's uneven statistics, they've had a couple big comebacks, and Kyler's had a couple impressive performances to put them at 6-4. As one of the biggest surprises in the league this year, Kyler is still good for his scrambling, and I would say he's surprisingly been pretty good. I'd give him a B- thus far. Kirk Cousins. Good old Kirk Cousins. You know, for all the crap that Kirk gets about being mediocre and being a loser, he is relatively consistent, at least in producing numbers, which in and of itself is a pretty rare thing to do for quarterbacks. The first couple weeks were a little bit up and down, and he's still liable for an occasional Kirk Cousins loss every now and then. But so far with the Falcons at 6-4, he's had a couple marquee games like throwing for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns versus the Bucs. He really destroyed the Bucs in both of their showdowns this season. He had a really good stretch. His numbers, 17 interceptions, 8 picks, 99 passer rating. He can be a little bit sack happy, but overall it's not a great season thus far. But I think the Falcons were looking for an upgraded quarterback. That's why they signed him. And so far, I think he's delivered. I would say I would give him a B. Lamar Jackson. Oh, Lamar, one of the most controversial and polarizing quarterbacks ever. As we all know, the Ravens got off to an 0-2 start, and Lamar was not producing the way he was capable of in the regular season at least. But then over the last 8 games, Lamar has had one of the best 8-game spans any quarterback has ever had, throwing 22 touchdowns to just 1 interception with an insane passer rating, while also generating a lot of numbers on the ground, although Derrick Henry is kind of eating into that too. He can be prone to some lost fumbles, and he got lucky against the Bengals a couple times, but he is firmly entrenched as the #1 MVP candidate once again, which will be ironic because if he wins again, he'll have 3 MVPs, and he'd have more MVPs than playoff wins. But, I mean, what are you going to do? You're just not going to give the guy who's been the best quarterback the award? That's what he's been. He's been historically dominant so far this season, and that's why I'm giving him an A+. Josh Allen. It looked as though the MVP was going to be Allen's to lose as the Bills started off 3-0, and his numbers were insane. But there were back-to-back losses, and a pretty ugly loss in Houston where he completed just 30% of his throws, and since then his numbers have been just okay. However, the Bills are 8-2, and they're once again in position for a title run, which is what they've been for the last 5 years. It hasn't worked out for them, obviously, in the playoffs, and that's where Allen and this era of Bills football will ultimately be judged, but still, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he's producing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, so I'll give him a B+ thus far. Bryce Young. Isn't he a little baby? So adorable. While yes, Bryce Young is a tiny quarterback, he's not that tiny. It's been a trying year for Young as he was benched after 2 games Williams, rightfully so. But then once Andy Dalton had a little fun and then reverted back to being Andy Dalton, the Panthers decided, hey, we invested the first overall pick in this guy. Let's put him out there and see if he can show us anything the rest of the year. And he has been slightly better since coming back. He's won back-to-back games as of this video, so he's 2-5 this year as a starter, although he still leaves a lot to be desired, and his overall season statistics are not very good. That's why I'm going to give him a D-. Andy Dalton. Speaking of Andy Dalton, as you can see by these game logs, he came out on fire once he was inserted into the starting lineup for Bryce Young, and then slowly but surely he devolved into Andy Dalton, which is why he's a backup quarterback and why for so many years he's been seen as just average at best. A very interesting career for Andy Dalton. Numbers-wise, he has been better so far this season than Bryce Young, which isn't really saying a lot. But as it stands right now, Dalton, unless Bryce Young gets hurt, will probably not see another important snap the rest of the season, as the Panthers are in another lost season. I guess I would give Dalton a grade of D-, just like Bryce Young, just because he wasn't winning anything and his numbers outside of his first game were very bad. Caleb Williams. If you've listened to me for a long time, you would know that I've been a fan of Caleb Williams, and it's been a pretty rocky rookie season thus far, which, I mean, is kind of to be expected for rookies. But Williams has shown flashes of the incredible potential that made him the first overall pick, but there's also been too many blah games. As of this video, over the last 3 weeks, Williams has not thrown a touchdown after a 3-game stretch in which it appeared that he was putting it together, with the Bears winning 3 in a row and starting 4-2. But now the Bears have lost 3 straight games, including one on a Hail Mary, and Williams has not been good at all. I still would like to believe that in the long term, this is just going to be growing pains and that Williams will figure it out and become a very good quarterback. But as of right now, what I've seen, he's taken a lot of sacks, his completion percentage isn't great, and the Bears offense has been inconsistent this season. So I'm going to have to give him a low grade. Let's give him a D+. Joe Burrow. Oh yes. If you want to say that he's been unlucky thus far this season, I won't completely disagree with you, although even though he's had very few turnovers, his turnovers have come at bad times. But still, the Bengals defense has been terrible, and they're wasting what looks like to be Burrow's best season of his career thus far, as he's completed 68% of his passes with 24 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, a 108 passer rating, and he's also lost 3 games where the offense put up at least 33 points. So it's not Burrow's fault that the Bengals are 4-6, but he is going to be docked a couple points because he has had some crucial turnovers, and while I won't give him an A+, I'll say he's been about an A-. He also gets docked points for the crappy Cody Rhodes haircut. Please, just go back to your regular hairstyle, Joe. Come on. Enough with the 2000 Eminem Slim Shady music video hair. Deshaun Watson, aka Groper Cleveland. You know, there is a part of me that wants to feel bad for Deshaun Watson, but then I remember what he's done, and I think, you know what? Fuck that guy. But think about your Deshaun Watson. Obviously, he got paid a shitload of money, and he's probably going to go down as the worst contract in sports history, based on everything, based on his lack of on-field production and all the off-the-field baggage. And who knows, we might have seen the last of Deshaun Watson in an NFL game, because the only reason why he was still being trotted out there before his injury was because of his contract. Now that he's out, the Browns might try and find a way to get rid of him. But imagine Deshaun Watson, imagine how he feels, where at one point you were one of the future stars of the league, you had great historic numbers, and then you just had this little problem off the field. You had a little problem, there was something wrong with your brain, and you do all this dumb shit, put it lightly, and then you get found out, and then you get a big contract, and you forget how to play football, and now everybody hates you, and everybody's going to remember you as a crappy quarterback because of your years in Cleveland. Overall, you just have to feel like the biggest, most worthless piece of shit imaginable, and I can't think of a better person to feel that way. That's why I'm giving Watson an F. Dak Prescott. This is going to be it for Dak Prescott this season. He just had season-ending hamstring surgery the other day, so it's another lost season for the Cowboys. Another year where the Cowboys don't make the conference championship game, whereas the Jaguars have made 3 conference championship games since the Cowboys last made it. But anyway, this isn't about the Cowboys, this is about Dak specifically, although they're kind of intertwined. At one point, Dak had the Cowboys 3-2, and it looked like, hey, things might be okay. But then the Cowboys got the shit kicked out of them at home by Detroit, and that started a 3-game losing streak with Dak. Then Dak sat out the game, and they got the shit kicked out of them at home by Eagles. They're now sitting at 3-6. Dak's gone for the season, and even before his injury, Dak was having a much worse season than he had last year when he was in MVP conversations. Again, is Dak a bad quarterback? No, but there's just something missing with this guy where you just have zero confidence in him coming through in big moments, and you just expect everything to go wrong as long as he has the ball in his hands. offense, just like he did with Romo. So not the worst quarterback, not the worst season ever, but still a lot left to be desired. That's why I'm giving Dak a grade of D+. Bo Nix. How about Bo Nix, ladies and gentlemen? I gotta be honest with you, I have seen Bo Nix make some horrible, horrific plays. He's already very old for a rookie. As we know, I make jokes about it. He's like 35 years old because he started like 100 games in college. But unironically, I have no idea whether this guy's going to be good or not. I call it Ryan Tannehill disease. Like, because when Ryan Tannehill was with the Dolphins to start his career, he always had just mediocre numbers, and I could never tell, is this guy good and being held back by a crappy team, or is he crap and holding back his team? And I kind of get that same vibe with Bo Nix, where there are some games where he's terrible and it looks like there's no future with him, and then there's other games, like you see in this list here, where he performs really well and the team wins, and you're like, wait a minute, this guy might be a long-time starter here to stay. But I just cannot get a read on this guy. I think he'll have a long career. That's what my gut tells me, but I don't know if it's going to be a super successful career. Thus far, I'm going to give him a C- grade. Been very up and down. I think it averages out to about a C-. Jared Goff. I'm glad that I waited an extra week to make this video, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have been able to include Goff's 5-interception game versus the Texans that he somehow won. The game versus the Texans has kind of tanked his stats on the season, although they're still really good season-wise. 72% completion, 16 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. He also has a receiving touchdown. Before the Texans game, it looked like he was in the MVP conversations, but he does get docked a couple points. The Lions are for real. They are a team that looks really well built, and they can withstand their quarterback throwing 5 interceptions. You know, and there's some games where Goff has not really had to do a lot, like against the Titans and against the Packers, just kind of be the game manager. But he has also had a couple really, really good games, but he's still liable for those no touchdown, 2 interception games. You know, he's basically still liable to be Jared Goff sometimes, and that's why you kind of hold back from putting him in that elite category. But he's been one of the better quarterbacks in the league this year, last game notwithstanding, and I think that's why he gets a grade of B+. Jordan Love. It's been a whirlwind of a season for Jordan Love, both on and off the field, as he's been injured in and out of games. The Packers have been up and down as well, and his own play has been up and down. He's thrown a lot of touchdowns, but he's also thrown a lot of interceptions, as you can see. I still feel like Love gets the benefit of the doubt from a lot of people when he plays bad, because he's following 2 first-ballot Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Favre and Rodgers. So people are just kind of waiting for him to become a first-ballot Hall of Fame quarterback, when I don't know if that's ever going to be the case. You know, maybe, and I've said this before, he might be the Jeff Garcia to the Montana and Young for Rodgers and Favre. Like, Jeff Garcia was a couple-time Pro Bowls, a good quarterback, had some good years, but not an all-time great quarterback. Maybe that's what Jordan Love is going to be. You know, he just makes so many dumb throws, though. That's the thing. He does make a lot of dumb throws, and he gets in trouble. But he's a type of guy, he keeps both teams in the game, you know, because he'll throw a lot of touchdowns. Overall, I would say he deserves a grade of like a C+. Need to see more consistency from him over the last 7 to 8 weeks. CJ Stroud. Folks, it appears that CJ Stroud is officially having the dreaded sophomore slump. It looked as though he was going to have another great season after 6 games with the Texans at 5-1 and him putting up great numbers. But over the last 4 games, the Texans are just 1-3, and Stroud has 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and a lot of forgettable games. His numbers really in every category across the board are down from his historically dominant rookie season. The talent is still there, all the traits are still there, but the production just hasn't been there like it was when he was a rookie. I still think that he's going to end up being okay, but this has definitely been a disappointing season individually for CJ Stroud, and unless he starts playing better, it's going to end up being a disappointing season for the Texans too, because they need him to play well in order to win. So I'm going to give CJ Stroud a grade of C-. Joe Flacco. The well-traveled veteran Joe Flacco. He came in off the bench to replace Anthony Richardson earlier this year, and he looked on fire just like he did with Cleveland at the end of last season, and then he kind of started to revert back to being the Joe Flacco we all know and love the last couple of weeks, throwing a bunch of interceptions, not taking care of the ball, not throwing for a lot of yards, and having a pretty crappy yards per attempt. Overall, his season numbers are okay, but as I was just making this video, he's now been re-benched for Anthony Richardson. The Colts have no fucking idea what they're doing over there, although I do think letting Richardson play out is the right move because Flacco's not the future. But this is typical Joe Flacco stuff where he has some great moments and then just a lot of blah. So I'll give him a C- grade. Trevor Lawrence. Every year we keep waiting for Lawrence to have that breakout season where he dominates and becomes a truly elite quarterback, and this year was once again not throughout the year. He started off very, very poorly as the Jaguars started 0-4. Then he started to pick it up a little bit over the next 4 games. The Jaguars won a couple games and lost a close one versus Green Bay, before Lawrence then had a terrible game versus the Eagles that they lost in the last moment with him throwing an interception. Now Lawrence is injured and will probably miss the rest of the season, since the Jaguars are 2-8 and they're basically all but done. Overall, the prince who was promised has not lived up to his promise, and therefore I give his season a grade of D. Patrick Mahomes. The weird thing with Mahomes is he's one of those guys that he's always going to be judged off of what he does in the postseason from now on, because he's already a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's already won 3 Super Bowls. Nothing he really does in the regular season at this point has a big impact on his legacy, but still, I would like to see him actually perform better and not throw a bunch of interceptions and throw more touchdowns than what he's been doing thus far this season. But to this point, it hasn't mattered because the Chiefs haven't lost, despite Mahomes being pretty mediocre. This is the second regular season in a row where Mahomes has been pretty mediocre, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Mahomes' regular season numbers have been pretty mediocre ever since Matt Nagy took over as offensive coordinator, but that's honestly a little bit of an excuse. Mahomes needs to be better, and he needs to perform better than how he's been performing, because eventually the Chiefs will have one of these close games go against them. They just have to hope that it's not in the playoffs. For a normal quarterback, I'd say Mahomes has had a pretty even season, but based on Mahomes' standards, I'd give his season a D-. Justin Herbert. When Jim Harbaugh was announced as the head coach of the Chargers, many people thought that this would finally be the season where Herbert would get a winning team around him because of having a great coach. And while the Chargers have gotten out to a 6-3 start and look to be the best, most well-rounded team of Herbert's career, especially defensively, Herbert has just been okay statistically. He's taken a lot of sacks and he hasn't thrown barely any interceptions. He's thrown 1 interception thus far this season, but only 11 touchdown passes. He's essentially been the game manager role. The Chargers offense has been okay. He has started to pick things up over the last 2 or 3 weeks, so maybe he will continue that into the latter part of the season and his numbers will end up being incredible. But thus far, Herbert's kind of just been a supercharged version of Alex Smith, which isn't bad, and he certainly is having a better season than the last couple years, but it's still not quite elite level, which is why I'll give Herbert a grade of B. Matthew Stafford. Good old John Matthew Stafford, always there to be inconsistent. He's thrown an interception in 7 of his 9 starts this year. He's only thrown 9 touchdowns, with 4 of those coming in one game. He isn't exactly the gunslinger that he used to be, and some of that might be because Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua have missed a lot of time, and he hasn't had a lot of talent around him at the skill positions, but the Rams are still a mediocre team. Stafford is basically what Stafford is. That one exception year, 2021, when he won the Super Bowl, it looks more and more like an outlier every single day. Stafford hasn't been great this season, and the Rams have lost some games they should have won. So really, I'm just going to give Stafford a grade of a D+. I mean, there's nothing really here besides mid. Gardner Minshew III. Somebody on the Raiders had to make this video, and it just so happened to be Gardner Minshew III, who everybody with a single brain cell knew would eventually get benched at some point for Aiden O'Connell, but with Aiden O'Connell getting hurt, Minshew was thrown back into the action, and then benched again for continuing to stink. 6 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He's lost 4 fumbles. The team was just 2-6 in his 8 starts. Just really pathetic stuff here. He's a great quarterback to have as a backup, but the more and more that he starts for your team, the more and more diminishing returns that you will see. And this season just further confirms that. So that's why I'm going to give him a grade of F. Tua Tagovailoa. Now look, I don't think Tua Tagovailoa is like a Hall of Fame quarterback or anything, but for whatever reason, I don't think it's a mistake or a coincidence that the Dolphins go from being complete dog shit without him at quarterback to a respectable team with him at quarterback. So he has to be somewhat good, although his concussion problems once again reared their ugly head this season, causing him to miss the majority of the first half of the season. His numbers certainly aren't great thus far, but they're much better than anything that Snoop Huntley or Tim Boyle or Skylar Thompson could put up. Is it really much of a brag to say that you're a better quarterback than those guys? No, but I do think Tua gets a little bit disrespected as just a product of Mike McDaniel when Mr. Mike McDaniel himself can't do shit unless Tua is a quarterback. Therefore, I'm going to give Tua a grade of C thus far. Sam Darnold, one of the darlings of the early NFL season. Darnold started off the season on fire with the Vikings beginning 4-0. Then he had a terrible game in London that the Vikings won, and he had a couple more good games back-to-back before having a terrible win versus the Jaguars and Mac Jones. So Darnold overall, at least comparative to his Jets days, has played pretty well, although he still is interception prone and fumble prone. So basically, he's still a turnover prone guy, even with arguably the most skilled skill positions of any team around him in the league. He's a guy, he's going to take chances, as we know, with his mono. He's going to take chances. He's going to get you some touchdowns, that you might not otherwise get, but he's also going to throw a lot of interceptions. So he's just going to be a merely average to good quarterback. He probably won't even be here next year because J.J. McCarthy will be starting, but he's been better than I thought he would be, which really isn't saying much. So I give him a grade of a B-. Derek Carr. Oh, my good friend Derek Carr. I told everybody to watch out for Derek Carr, especially after the first 2 weeks of the season when the Saints blew out the Panthers and Cowboys, and Derek Carr had amazing numbers, and it was the best team ever, and they were going to be compared to the 07 Patriots, blah, blah, blah. Well, since then, the Saints have lost 7 of 8 games and are now 3-7, but Carr did miss 3 games, so Carr's record is only 3-4, which still sounds about right for a Derek Carr team. Somebody said that Derek Carr is a tremendous loser, and I just love that because I've always struggled how to describe him to somebody because the stats are always nice with Carr. The stats are always pretty good, and again, this year, the numbers so far, pretty good. 103 passer rating, 67% completion, 11 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Like, that's pretty good numbers, but yet he just always seems to find a way to lose more than he wins, and I can't put my finger on it, but somebody calling him a tremendous loser was hilarious. So while I don't think Carr has been horrible by any means this year, he's basically been typical Derek Carr, and that means he's going to be about a C-. Jacoby Brissett. Oh yes, Jacoby Brissett, the most boring, absolute worst type of quarterback imaginable. A guy who is a check down Charlie, doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, doesn't throw a lot of touchdowns, doesn't throw for a lot of passing yards. He just completely plays the position the absolute worst possible way it's supposed to be played. And for whatever reason, despite drafting Drake May 3rd overall, the Patriots decided to trot Brissett out there for the first 5 weeks of the season and proceed to basically fuck their season because Brissett was terrible before they finally let Drake May come in. More on him later. But yeah, Brissett was he was as bad as you would imagine. He's just the absolute worst type of quarterback. There are bad quarterbacks who are fun to watch and exciting to watch because they'll throw the ball deep and they'll take chances and they might throw interceptions, but they're still fun. Brissett is the exact opposite of that. The ultra conservative quarterback who sucks. So I'm going to give him a grade of F. Drake May. Now we get to Brissett's teammate and 3rd overall pick, Drake May, who has shown a lot of potential thus far, although it's been sort of a bumpy ride because he missed most of a game with a concussion. He came back and has been okay. He still has shown a lot of rookie flaws and had a couple rookie moments to make you go, why the hell would you throw that? But still, it's beyond clear that the Patriots are in a better position to win games and are a much better team with Drake May calling the shots. And he does have the potential, it looks like, to become a pretty good quarterback. I do laugh, though, at how people are still trying to work around the fact that he's athletic and white because they say, oh, well, it's a really understated part of his game that he can run the ball. Huh, why is it understated, I wonder? I don't know how good he's going to be, but in this rookie class, he's arguably been the best rookie quarterback outside of Jaden Daniels thus far. And so based on rookie standards, I'll probably give him a grade of a C. Daniel Jones. I really don't know what it's going to take for the Giants to finally pull the plug on this motherfucker because he's been doing this shit for now, 6 years? He started almost 70 games. There have been very few quarterbacks throughout the history of the league that have been allowed to be so dog shit for so long, particularly for one team. But as an Eagles fan, I'm not complaining, but I finally believe that the Giants are going to pull the plug on Jones and let Drew Lock take the reins, at least for a little bit. Maybe they'll let Tommy DeVito play a little bit. Who knows? But Daniel Jones is not the guy, and we all know that. He's not the guy. He's terrible. He gets a grade of F. Aaron Rodgers. There's a part of me that is sad watching Aaron Rodgers play football now because he's really the last pillar of that previous generation of Peyton and Breeze and all those other great quarterbacks who played in the previous era. The fact is that Rodgers should probably just retire. I mean, he doesn't have it anymore. He's still capable of having some good games, as you can see, but the inconsistency is not there. He still hasn't thrown for 300 yards in a game since the end of the 2021 season. It's just a sharp fall off from where he was in his prime, and even a couple years ago when he last won MVP. The Jets' offense isn't great. Their defense is okay, but inconsistent. Their special teams has really been what's messed them up and cost them a couple games, but still, Rodgers is 41. He's about to be 41 at least, and really, I don't think the Jets can stand another season of him being washed up because he's not the Aaron Rodgers that he used to be. So I'm going to give him a grade of D-. It's time for him to retire and become, I would say, a family man, but we know he doesn't like family. Jalen Hurts. My boy Jalen Hurts. I always have believed in Jalen Hurts. I've been bullish on Jalen ever since he balled out in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. There are not many quarterbacks throughout the history of the NFL that can say they have a great performance in the Super Bowl. It's a lot smaller than you think, but Jalen Hurts is one of those guys. So I said, even though through the struggles he had towards the end of last year, and he had a couple struggles towards the beginning of this season, and the Eagles started 2-2, I said, you know what? I still believe in this guy. He's going to get it right. He can be frustrating, but he's going to get it right eventually. I believe he will. And I've been rewarded now because over the last 5 weeks, Jalen Hurts has been amazing. The Eagles have won 5 in a row. His numbers are back towards his MVP caliber numbers from a couple years ago, and the Eagles are looking like a dangerous team with an improved defense. And again, people are always going to get on Jalen Hurts. Oh, he only scores off of the tush push and all this other bullshit. And I said, you know what? How great is it where the only quarterback controversy for your favorite team is how many touchdowns they score and not whether or not they can score touchdowns. That's why I always welcome the tush push conversations, because it's people complaining about my team scoring touchdowns. That's a great thing to be complaining about, in my opinion. So I think Jalen Hurts has been one of the better quarterbacks in the league thus far this year. So I'm going to give him a grade of a B+. Justin Fields. It's an ironic season thus far for Justin Fields. He started out leading the Steelers in their first 6 games, and they went 4-2 in those games, despite Fields being pretty inconsistent, as he normally is. Not terrible, or not as bad as he was with the Bears, but still not a guy who's clutch and still made too many mistakes. And the Steelers' offense wasn't very good, particularly in the red zone. But remember all the people bitching and complaining when Russell Wilson came back, and they said, oh, it's unfair to Justin Fields, as if he was fucking Peyton Manning or Drew Brees or somebody, or Patrick Mahomes. Like, give me a fucking break. Justin Fields was winning because of his fucking defense, dude. Justin Fields still isn't very good, and Russell Wilson has been even better than him thus far this year. Although Wilson did not qualify for this video because he hasn't thrown 140 passes yet. I'm a stickler for the rules, folks. But yeah, Justin Fields, he was okay at best. I'll give him a fucking cookie. Let's give him a C-. Who gives a shit, really? Geno Smith. We are in year 3 of Geno Smith's resurrection of his career, and I think that people sometimes still forget that he's not a great quarterback. He looks great compared to what he did his first couple years with the Jets. I guess you could kind of say it's similar to Sam Darnold, where, you know, compared to what they did with the Jets, their numbers now look great. But Geno was really, really good in 2022. He was just okay last year, and he's been just okay this year. He still has really good highlights, but the Seahawks aren't a great team. He's still prone to interceptions. He's not throwing for as many touchdowns as he was a couple years ago when he threw for 30. So I think while his play is still okay and still better than anybody thought it would be a couple years ago, when looking at the total landscape of the NFL, I'll say he's about average at best. So I'll give him a C- thus far. Brock Purdy. Last year, Brock Purdy had really the best numbers of any quarterback in the NFL, but he didn't win MVP largely because of the stigma that he's a product of Kyle Shanahan, which again is kind of unfair because Purdy, when you watch him play, he does make a lot of nice throws down the field, and he has kind of a, you know, water gun arm, not a very strong arm. And he's also had some legitimately bad games this year, which he really didn't have last year outside of the Monday night game versus Baltimore. You know, throwing 3 picks versus the Chiefs, blowing a huge lead versus the Cardinals. The 49ers in general have been a little bit disappointing. They're only 5-4, but they're starting to pick it up now. CJ McCaffrey. I said that again. Christian McCaffrey is back. They've lost some talent, but obviously getting McCaffrey back will help. Overall, his numbers are okay. I'd like to see him have more touchdowns. He's another guy that he's understated with how good he is as a runner. I wonder why. But yeah, he's been a lot better on the road thus far this year than he has at home for whatever reason. But either way, I'll say he's been a pretty, he's been not nearly as good as he was last year, but still relative to the rest of the field, I'll give him a B-. Baker Mayfield. Where art thou, Baker? This is a very up and down season for Baker. He leads the league, or he's tied for the league lead, I believe, in touchdowns with 24. Shout out to Jack Bauer. And he started off the season great, and the Buccaneers started off the season great, going 4-2, and Baker was even in some MVP conversations, but they've dropped 4 in a row, although their defense is largely the culprit for that. Baker's also been prone to interceptions at times, but he is having a good season. It's just that the Buccaneers defense is not really giving him enough support most of the time, and the Bucs now sit at 4-6, but luckily for them, the NFC South is not a good division, so they might be able to squeeze in a wild card spot once again like they had the last couple years. But either way, this has been, I would say, the best production from a Buccaneers quarterback that I've seen in a very, very long time. I can't think of any other good quarterbacks they've had in recent memory. Will Levis. Oh yes, we get to Will Levis, the mayonnaise 2-pump chump. Simply put, Will Levis, he stinks. He stinks. He turns the ball over a lot. He fumbles the ball a lot, which is funny. He's one of those exciting bad quarterbacks to watch. You know, he's going to make a play or two that'll make you laugh, but he just, there's just not a lot there. Again, he's the type of guy, he really owes Josh Allen all of his contract money, because the only reason he got drafted as highly as he did was because of Josh Allen. And this could also go for Anthony Richardson as well. All these guys that are traits guys that weren't great in college and had mediocre stats in college, teams are going to be fucking taking chances on him now because Josh Allen was the same way, and Josh Allen ended up becoming great. He he's the 1 in 1,000 outlier exception, but teams are going to be fooled into guys with mediocre production and strong arms like Will Levis, and Will Levis stinks. I gave him a grade of F. And then finally, we get to, presumably, the Rookie of the Year, Jaden Daniels. Now, I gotta admit, when I found out that Daniels has only thrown 9 touchdowns this season, I thought that sounds a little low. But the Washington offense, led by Daniels, has been amazing. Their defense, that's another story, and why I ultimately still don't think that Washington is a very scary team, even though Daniels looks like he's going to be a good player. He also did get lucky with that Hail Mary throw versus the Bears. He hasn't turned the ball over a lot. He completes a lot of passes. He looks like he's going to be a good player. I don't think his rookie season has been as good as what CJ Stroud had last year, but it's another player like him where it just goes to show you that as a quarterback, you either have it or you don't. And sitting behind some shitty journeyman quarterback like Jacoby Brissett for 5 or 6 games isn't going to make a difference. So props to Washington for knowing what they had in Jaden Daniels and actually playing him instead of just putting out, some shitty quarterback for 3 or 4 games for no reason before replacing Daniels with him. So I would say Daniels thus far, overall, I'll give him an A-.